This is Booking It to Financial Freedom, show number 26.
You have to first be the leader in your life before you can be the manager, because you have to understand these are two completely different roles. Management is actually, doing things correctly, where leadership is doing the right things.
Giving them the leeway to accomplish the tasks in the manner that they come up with. There's 18 different ways to build a chair, right? But at the end of the day, as long as the end result is a chair, right? And so you should, if you're going to delegate stewardship to someone for a task or a mission, whatever, you should give them the leeway to accomplish that the way that they deem fit, right? Otherwise, you are coming back to the gopher side of it, micromanaging.
He talks about the urgency addiction, and I talked about that a little bit in the beginning, because I definitely have this. It's that sense of like, oh, I've done something, I've put out a fire, and now on to the next thing, and now the next thing, and now I've got all these things checked off.
Just to keep up the appearance of like, oh, I'm working 5 hours late, and I've sent like 4 million emails more than you have, and all this other stuff. Literally just people trying to, earn stars, right? It's just unhealthy.
I love being able to say, like, when somebody asks me, like, oh, how'd you spend your day? And I was like, oh, I spent 2 hours playing tennis today. Like, to me, that's great, because that's 2 hours I was able to take out of my day to enjoy something that I like. Yes, hustle, absolutely hustle, but understand how you're spending your hours. Don't be busy just to be busy. Be effective.
Welcome to Booking It to Financial Freedom, where we explore literature from some of the most successful experts in their field to help you build a blueprint for personal growth and financial freedom. Join us as we examine a new book every month and break down key concepts to help you get out of the rat race and on track to start building a life better than you ever imagined.
Hey everyone, I'm your host, Amanda Schneider, realtor and investor, and I'm here with my co-host and teammate, Jamie Booth. Hey, Jamie.
Hey, man, how's it going?
Good. Welcome back from your trip to Ohio.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to be back. It's like I love going there, love visiting family and all that stuff, but it was one of those trips that was like I need a vacation from my vacation. Yeah,
that happens for sure.
Yeah. And I was kind of giggling like as we were coming into the intro because of my mustache. It's just so obnoxious.
If you're not watching the video, definitely find us. This is episode 26 on YouTube and see Jamie's mustache. It's pretty great.
Yeah, so far, 26 episodes, and you've seen almost. Well,
different
no,
phases?
I did. I have full evolution because I had full beard for a while, then no beard, then a little bit of scruff, and then I basically did the mustache thing as just to bother my wife.
Yeah, I actually don't think it looks bad. So, and I don't know, have we recorded one with your full beard? Because you can grow like a really massive beard.
Yeah, I would like all the first. I think the first
couple.
Well, first 20 or so probably I had the beard.
Yeah, I feel like it wasn't quite as like when I first met you, it was like, I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
I got good at grooming it. It wasn't quite so out of control.
That's what it was. That's too funny.
Oh, my goodness.
So what did you do in Ohio? You were doing a bunch of camping? And
we stayed at, I grew up next to this place called Lake Hope State Park. I learned how to fish there, and I grew up hunting and stuff in the local area. So I just love being in the country there. And I don't get to make it back to Ohio very often during the summer, because usually I prioritize hunting season, and it's already fall. All the leaves are usually always gone, and it's gloomy at that point. So it's nice to get back when it's warm, also to escape from Colorado, because, even here in the summertime, you have to wear a coat at night, depending on where you're at. Like last night, 4th of July, I was cold. Like I was glad I had a jacket, and it was insane coming back from Ohio where it's, 90 degrees. And
is it humid there?
Super humid. Yeah. So super boggy, hot, even at night.
Yeah.
It did cool off at nights and was nice, but so we stayed at a cabin there at Lake Hope for like 4 days. Went to Cincinnati, Ohio, did a riverboat cruise, saw the aquarium down there, did a few things. Sightseeing. Oh, and there's a local drama in Chillicothe, Ohio that I like to go see. It's called Tecumseh. If anybody's ever in the local area and has a chance to see it, it's an outdoor drama. It's absolutely cool as heck.
And they have it all the time?
Yeah, it's a summer. Every summer they run it for several months through the summer, I think, into the fall. But it's really neat. It's a really neat thing to see.
Yeah.
So just had fun, but overall the trip just kind of it sucked all the energy out of me.
Yeah.
And I drove there and back because I wanted to have my Jeep, and that was probably my biggest mistake. So
yeah, that's a long
the
drive.
trip back with tons of thunderstorms and traffic and all that stuff took a lot longer than normal. So
Yeah.
I am recovering right
Good.
now.
Well, it's good to have you back.
I heard good news about you on the tennis front.
Yes.
Still undefeated.
Still undefeated. I think I said in one of the episodes that I was going to play in a tournament over at Memorial Park, a singles tournament. So I actually ended up winning that, and I played even. If anyone who doesn't follow tennis, there's different like levels. So basically 2-5 is a beginner and what I started at, but I entered the tournament as a 3-0 just to see, and I ended up winning it.
Nice. Congratulations.
So super fun. I mean, I was telling you, I've been working my butt off. It's not just that. I mean, I'm naturally athletic, but I play almost every day and I take a couple lessons a week. So that's why I've been able to get better quick.
You had to like give up your doubles career.
Yeah, exactly.
So you could excel
Yes.
be excellent at the singles. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we are going to continue with the 7 habits of highly effective people. And last week we covered habits 1, just 1, I think. Yeah, because we did the intro. And
Yeah,
then
the intro.
1. Mm-hmm. So just to kind of recap, habit 1 was be proactive rather than reactive. And this is basically just about having the self-awareness and, being conscious of kind of how we were raised and maybe how it makes us react to certain things and kind of trying to keep those reactions in check.
Yeah, kind of taking charge of your life. Yes. And not being a victim to everything going on around you.
Mm-hmm. That is a great way to say it. We talked about the circle of influence versus the circle of concern. So your circle of influence is the things that you actually have control over, and the circle of concern are just things outside your control, and you need to kind of recognize and distinguish between those.
Which we all have a big problem. We always worry about and get angry about all those things we can't control. So it's about focusing on the stuff that you can and not letting all the other stuff dictate your emotions.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me of, I think it's the Alcoholics Anonymous prayer or whatever, of just like,
yes.
God, give me the strength to...
I think they actually have that in the book too.
Oh,
I think they use it as an example. Yeah. The whatever it is, give you the strength to control the things that you can and the whatever to
be proactive and not reactive.
Yeah, and to ignore the stuff that you can't kind of stuff.
Yeah. That's a good mantra.
Yeah.
So today we're going to cover habit number 2 and habit number 3. And again, as we discussed in the last episode, these all kind of just build upon each other. So you're building a foundation and each flows into the next.
Yeah, they're really good. I love the way that they tie into each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you'll see a lot of the just these overarching themes that we see in all these other different books, that just these things that hold true no matter how you apply them to your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're just kind of like the basic laws of life, like they're going to apply no matter what. Well, we were talking about this before we started. It's like, this book is awesome. We both really love it. It's really deep. Yes. So I think that some people might have a hard time getting through it because he's a lifelong teacher. I think he kind of wrote this book kind of from a text, like a kind of a textbook standpoint. Mm-hmm. So psychologically, it goes really deep into some of these topics, which I appreciate. I like it because I enjoy these topics that we read about and stuff like that. So it's kind of see it a little deeper is nice, but hopefully it doesn't turn a lot of the people who are trying to follow along with us off.
Right. And we did our best to try to pick out just some of the key things, as I'm going through this outline that you and I usually go off of. It's just like, oh my gosh, we're still on habit number 2. Like he talks and talks. My suggestion, because this is just what I do, and I've said it before, but I typically listen to longer books on 1.5 to like 1.8 speed. Mm-hmm. And it kind of helps, especially when the chapters are longer, to get through it and you can still understand it all.
Yeah. And for people who do it, so Amanda gave me that tip. I am a slow reader naturally. Mm-hmm. And especially if I'm reading like a real book, mm-hmm. I digest everything and all that stuff. So I took your advice and I cranked it up little by little. I get up to like, I think the setting was like 1.7.
Yeah.
And I was having a little hard time digesting it at first, but after like maybe 20 minutes, my brain was fully adjusted and I was getting through the material.
Right.
Because I like to. This is my thing. I like to listen to the audiobook and read the hard copy at the same time. So I don't know. It's just kind of weird, but it helps me focus more. I don't know. Maybe my brain is just really weird, but to me, it kind of helps me focus. I'm hearing it and seeing it at the same time, and I'm just like trying to zone in on material and digest it fully. So, but yeah, I got up to 1.7 and it definitely helped because heck, I think a couple of these sections were like 2.5 hours on the audio.
The book is like almost 500 pages long, so it's a long book. But I would not recommend listening to it that fast if you're trying to concentrate on something else. Like I usually just do it when I'm working out, and I kind of know what reps and stuff I'm going to do, or if I'm driving.
Yeah.
Like if you have other things to concentrate on, you'll miss all.
No, yeah, definitely don't do that. I mean, I couldn't even get up and get a cup of coffee without being like not like missing stuff.
Yeah.
So I was just on that. I was like laser focused.
Yeah.
So
cool. Okay. So habit number 2 is begin with the end in mind. And when he opens this chapter, he asks the reader to think about attending a funeral. And there's certain speakers and they're speaking, there's a cousin and a sister and a person from work, blah, blah, blah. And then it's actually your funeral. So what would you, at the end of your life, what would you want these people in the different areas of your life to say about you? And that's kind of the whole, message behind habit number 2 is we have to think about ultimately what kind of life do we want to live and backwards plan.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great way to live your life. Like, and he even says to do it in the book, like literally sit down and write your eulogy for your funeral, and then kind of like reverse plan like that. And there's a lot to this. I really like, starting with a goal in mind. We've talked about this in multiple other books.
Yes.
You got to have a goal in life, or you're just gonna be floundering around. So if you don't know what you want your life to be, then you're at the mercy of everything that happens to you.
Yeah.
As opposed to living your life with a purpose.
Exactly. To know what your end destination is. And if you identify this, then you can hold yourself accountable to every day doing something to ensure that you are, not violating what you have decided is your destination. So working every day towards that goal and not getting caught up in the busyness of just being busy, but literally working towards your end goal.
Yeah. Keeping your day in line with your, I think we talk about later, but like your center, right? Your purpose. And so,
yes. Yeah. He has I think this is his quote, but I really like it. It says, if the ladder is not leaning against the right wall, every step we take just gets us in the wrong place faster.
Yeah. So. I like that one. I saw that in the show notes, but I like the other one he uses in the book too, where he's talking about how the crew is blazing through the jungle with machetes and like they're just moving forward, right? They don't care. They're just like, we're making progress.
Yeah.
But then the dude climbs the tree and he's like, hey, we're in the wrong jungle. So it doesn't matter how much progress you feel you're making. If you're not even in the right place, it doesn't matter.
Yep. And he uses that example later on to also distinguish between being a leader in your own life and also a manager, which is something that we'll also get into. But another key topic he brings up is that all things are created twice, which I had to kind of read this chapter, like this section over until I understood what he was saying. But I really like the example of building a house. So basically when you're building a house, you have to have a blueprint, you're working with your architect, you know exactly what the house is going to look like on paper, and then you start to physically build the house. So you've built it twice because you know on paper what it looks like. Now you're physically building that.
Well, this really ties into visualization as well, which we've talked about before. We'll talk about later on in these, I think this chapter or the next one, but it just shows how powerful that whole concept is. And a lot of people, including ourselves, we've talked about this back and forth in this podcast. Like, it seems really hokey, but it's extremely powerful. And I love it. And I love the fact that you don't know anything about houses. So this is why it resonated with you, right?
Yeah. I was like, I don't?
Yeah. I slid that one in there pretty good, didn't
right? Like, Jamie, what are you saying? But by doing this and having this blueprint in our mind, then we can actually live our life by design and not default. So people aren't coming in and dictating our life, how we're spending our day. We're not constantly getting interrupted with others' needs and wants. We have a plan, a blueprint to follow, and we can implement that every day. So he said, to put it another way, habit 1 is you are the creator. And then habit 2 is actually making that first creator. So habit 1, understanding that you are the designer of your life. And habit 2 is actually putting that into creation. He also says, win the war, not the battle, which I really like that.
Yeah, I like it. It's huge. I think too often we try to rush to conclusions. We try to rush to results or whatever. But we really just have to stay focused on the little things and just move forward, right? it's a marathon, not a race, you know, all that, or not a sprint. Marathon is a race, but you know what I'm saying. But you know what I'm saying.
I can give you a tennis analogy.
Yeah.
So our coach always says, because you know when you're playing tennis, obviously you're scoring each game, and she said not to concentrate on the game, but point by point. So it's not that I'm trying to win that game; I'm trying to win that point.
Focus on the next
and then
point.
You focus on the next point,
Yeah,
and then
I
if
like
you
that.
focus on the points enough, and you're doing the right things,
They build up.
They build up, and then you win the game, and then you win the set and the match.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good one.
You guys are welcome. Let's see. Oh, he said this often involves rescripting, which is, we talked about this in the intro, is just changing our paradigm. So what we may have been raised to believe, or what society has taught us, like, it's not always correct, and it's not necessarily anyone's fault, but it's just how our experiences.
Reprogramming what are, you know, like we've talked about, you know, this a lot in the past. I like his use of paradigms. He uses it quite often throughout the entire book. But it's true. It's like we have to shift our reality, right? With our limiting beliefs that we have, our the negative self-talk, the negative outside influences and stuff. We have to try to rewrite our paradigm. Like we can change how we see things on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
It doesn't always have to be negative. We can rescript it into something that's positive or, you know, beneficial to us in the long run.
Or even just realizing, I would say it doesn't always have to be like a negative to a positive, but just being open-minded enough to know the way you thought about one thing isn't always necessarily the right way to think about it or the way to be the most successful. He gives the example, if anyone, you know, follows politics or history, of Anwar Sadat. And when he was raised to hate, he was the president of Egypt. He was raised to hate Israel. And so as he's like coming up through the ranks, he's using all this like language against Israel and how he would never shake an Israeli's hand as long as the Arabs were still occupying, blah, 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 you know, all this stuff. And then comes to realize that nothing is going to happen positively for his country if he continues that language of hatred, and literally reprograms himself to, you know, just think differently about that country and the people. And he was instrumental in the Camp David Accords, which was a huge peace
completely different. Yeah, completely different.
So I mean, if somebody at that level can completely reprogram the hate that they have in their heart, like that's all of us can do that too.
I mean, this is like, you know, not to offend anybody. I mean, this is the equivalent of someone like a Hitler, kind of like turning a leaf, you know, is like, oh yeah, I guess I was wrong all along. Right. So if you can shift something that, I mean, this was like ingrained into him, like in every fiber of his being, and he was able to change. So, so if someone can overcome something that, you know, that crazily ingrained in your being, right? You know, you can make little changes. Yeah. There's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of things that keep us down that, you know, we think are huge, but at the end of the day, they're really not that you know, dramatic.
Yep. It's really taking personal responsibility and having the mental fortitude to change things. So he makes a big distinction about leadership and management. And the way I kind of understood this is habit 2 is really about, you have to first be the leader in your life before you can be the manager, because you have to understand these are two completely different roles.
Yeah, he talks a lot about you know, like you said, difference between leadership management. I think that, but the point he's trying to make is personal leadership, personal accountability on yourself. So he's, you know, he digs into the weeds, the difference between management. I mean, this could have been
this was a long part.
Almost could have been a military course, and it's like a, you know, a little military course in itself. But yeah, basically what it boils down to is that you have to take personal accountability for your actions.
Yeah. And like you said, just to play on that, is not to get too deep in the weeds, because that's management. Management is actually, you know, doing things correctly, where leadership is doing the right things. So, you know, managing everything, making sure that everyone is in the roles they should be in, but not getting deep in the weeds and not handling all that day-to-day stuff. He said efficient management without effective leadership is like straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. So no management success can compensate for failure in leadership. So, you know, unless somebody is telling someone the iceberg is right ahead, they're straightening those deck chairs isn't going to do
Yeah,
anything to save
exactly.
lives. So, and he said, leaders should not be wrapped up in the day-to-day logistics. Often leaders feel accomplished because we are responding to urgent matters that need to be handled right away, but it shouldn't be handled by us as leaders. Right. It should be our managers and our people that we put in place, just like who, not how, finding your right who's.
Yeah, that resonated with me when I saw that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, and then also, so to begin with the end in mind, as this habit is, develop a personal mission statement. So I have yet to do this, and at the end of the chapter, there is an exercise that his son takes you through. So this was in addition to the original book, but how you can actually form your own personal mission statement. It's definitely something I want to do. There's several examples in the book, which I think are great. I'll probably take some of those and kind of tweak them a little bit. But this is how you get really focused on what's most important, what your end state is finding this mission statement and then holding yourself accountable every day to whether you're moving yourself closer to that mission statement.
Yeah, this resonated with me back to the one thing, right? So it's about finding your sole purpose of moving forward, right? Of course, your mission statement can be, it goes fairly broad, you know. I love the fact that he deep dives doing this because it is an important thing because every successful, and I don't know if we have it in the show notes, but it's you have your personal mission statement, but every successful organization has a organizational mission statement as well. So without that guidance, you're, again, without having the end in mind, you're just kind of floundering around. So your personal mission statement keeps you grounded, right, as you maneuver through all these things that affect your day and all that other stuff, or your life or family or whatnot.
Yeah.
So having a powerful personal mission statement, it keeps your compass in the right, keeps you moving in the right direction.
It's
despite diversity.
Yeah, and it's just a way that you can measure yourself on whether you're on the right track. If you don't really know what your personal mission statement is, then how do you evaluate yourself on a day-to-day basis? He's even an advocate of having a family mission statement. So basically having a mission statement kind of in every important part of your life. But I don't know if it was him or if it was the son at the end that talks about how they had developed a family mission statement and nobody wanted to do it, but they all ended up doing it together.
But he also, I think he expands upon the fact that that had a profound impact on his brother ended up being super successful. He talks about how much of a positive impact that had on his life and stuff. So I can see where this would definitely be really, really, the family mission statement would be really powerful for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I don't have kids, but I can see how it would, bringing your kids up in that kind of environment, and everyone has their purpose and their way that they help to make the family run. I mean, Stephen Covey was really well known, was constantly speaking, coaching. So, I mean, he was very busy, but when he had his family time, but he also had his children. I mean, he gives a story of the one son that helps with the lawn work. Yeah. He had them in their specific roles of this is how, as a family, everyone contributes. And I love that because otherwise you don't necessarily maybe feel part of the family or feel that you're helping move the success of the family.
Yeah. I don't know if there was another story in here, and I don't know if it was in this section or one of the later sections, but he was talking about where the boss wanted him to work on Sunday. And he's like, no, sorry, we've devoted our Sundays to focus on religion and all that stuff. And he's like, okay, well, I need you to come in on Saturday. And he was like, nope, my family we have all agreed that Saturday is for family, stuff. So yeah, I like and they stick to it, right?
Yes.
So that's your standards, and you stick to it 100%. So being able to enforce that through your family or your personal mission statement really helps you, again, stay grounded and stay focused.
And it was, scary, I guess, for him to do that because, of course, you're saying no to your boss. But it actually made him more respected in the end because he had his boundaries, works hard Monday through Friday when he's supposed to be there. And then he had his boundaries. He also brings up the idea of what we center our lives around, which this was an interesting part for me. And I kept kind of wondering where he was going to go with it when he goes through all of the different centers that a lot of people have. And, you can read through this chapter to read each one of them, but, spouse, family, money, work, church can all be a center in your life. But he's saying these things can all change. Unfortunately, people can die. If your center is possessions can get lost. You can, you use them all up, you can lose your money, etc. So we really want to make sure that we're centering our lives around core principles, things that are truly important to us, and that, our morals and our values, because those things will never change and will never go away. It's our decision to make those.
I really like the way he highlighted in this section how, with different examples of how this would be applicable to you.
Yes.
Like he talks about how if you're too centered, so basically you don't want to be so centered on any one of these one aspect so much that it dictates every decision that you make in your life.
Yes.
Right. And, he used a great example of the church, someone who is completely dependent on like codependent or dependent on personal relationships. So like your spouse, your family, or if you're completely obsessed with obtaining money or, pleasure, stuff like that, and how that affects you in the long. Like, I just love the examples that he used, because you can see that, like, on each example, I could see how each one of those have resonated to me, or like I could see where it relates to some of the things that I have done, and some of the decisions I've made in the past, which probably weren't the best decisions, because you're so focused on one of these aspects, it leads you to make decisions that aren't necessarily the best.
Yes.
Right. So being able to find your center, like the healthy center where only the most important things, like you said, matter, it really influences your decision making, like later on, right? So being self-aware that, I'm sure a lot of people who may fall into one of these categories don't realize they're there. So their decision making is being, dictated by these off-center areas of their life. So I liked it. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it keeps you grounded, but it also, for lack of a better term, it helps to it prevents you from hurting someone's feelings. So he gave the example of, what if you had bought concert tickets for your spouse, and then your boss calls you at the last minute and says, no, I need you to come into work tonight. Do you, if you're family focused, then you tell your boss, no, I'm not doing that. If you're work focused, then you tell your wife, I'm sorry, I can't take you to the concert. So one of the two of them is disappointed. But if you make that decision based on a core value or principle that you have, then you can feel good about whatever decision you decide to make, because that's your center.
Yeah, because you're making a decision based on a solid ground, as opposed to one of these off-center dictations.
Yeah, exactly. And he, just kind of emphasizes this by saying, as a principle-centered person, you come up with the best solution. So you're not being acted upon by others. You know your decision is the most effective because it's based on that principle. You're choosing to contribute to your ultimate value in your life. You're effectively communicating your decision and the reasons behind it, and then you feel comfortable with your decision. So all of those help to aid in your overall just comfort with that decision that you've made. And to kind of tie it around, when you make that personal mission statement, this is when you're defining your principles and what those core values are, and that's how you live your life. We kind of already touched on it, but towards the end of this chapter, he talks about the power of affirmations and visualization. And he talks about how a lot of us are kind of left brain thinkers, but we really need to fire up that right brain, which is the power of visualization and becoming more congruent with those values. So he gives the example of, if there's something a child does that just kind of irritates you or immediately gets you upset, is taking that time, in the morning, hopefully when you're doing your miracle morning, thinking about those times that your child upsets you and how you can react in a better way. And actually visualizing, going through that whole exercise to truly change how, instead of being reactive, we're proactive to those situations.
Yeah, there's a really good example in the book that he uses that it makes it very clear to see how powerful it could be if you implement it correctly.
Yeah. And I like that idea, because I feel like when we were reading the Miracle Morning and you're talking about visualization, part of that is like, let me visualize the person I want to be in the future, which is also great. But if you're struggling with certain circumstances happening in your life right now, and you're repeatedly acting the same way, and you want to fix that behavior, doing a visualization to see how you can react different, visualizing yourself reacting different. I hadn't thought about it that way before.
Yeah. No, it's really good, because I know people that are in my life that are triggered. We use that's a buzzword that we have these days, triggered.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so if you recognize that you see something and you immediately explode in anger, right? That you get triggered by that thing. So you can use these visualization visualization techniques to help overcome, and because it's not healthy. If something, you see something and you're, blind with rage within 5 seconds,
Right.
that is not healthy.
Well, and so much of that is taking personal responsibility, because when you immediately get upset by it, you want to blame the other person for doing that trigger to you to make you that way. But ultimately, it's you that is reacting that way.
Yeah.
I only have control over my own reactions.
Yep.
So, and affirmations are the same. If visualization doesn't work for you, because it's not always something that everyone can do. I'm a person that has a hard time visualizing. I'm much better at writing. So, even writing out how you would respond, or writing out this scenario, I think, or an affirmation that you say every day that you can think about before you react.
Yeah. And the other thing that he does in the book that I really appreciated is he, I've seen, positive, we've covered this material quite often, but I like the way he breaks it down into what is not only a powerful, but an effective affirmation. Like he breaks it down. I think, do we have it in the
I didn't
show?
put it in there. No.
No, you do.
Oh, I
Got
did.
it. So, a good affirmation should be personal, positive.
Oh, yeah.
It should be of the present tense. There should be visual aspects to it and emotional aspects that you can tie to your affirmation.
Yeah.
So with all of those particular aspects in your affirmation, you've written you've got a good one on your hand.
Mm-hmm.
And if you use those, over and over, right? Repetitive, like the miracle morning.
Yes.
If you say those things over and over and over, eventually your paradigm will change in that aspect. So
It's kind of like I had talked to, I think it was a doctor one time, and we were talking about how prescriptive medicines can help for people that have depression, because she described it as, think of your brain as a record that's spinning, and what do you call the thing that
the needle,
yeah, is stuck on one track.
Yeah.
And in this example, she was saying, like, a drug that can help with depression picks up that needle and moves it to the next track. And I feel it the same way with affirmation and visualizations is, you've got a story that maybe you've been telling yourself your whole life. And so it's going to take a lot of repetition to pick that needle up and change it to the next track. So, okay. Habit 3. This is put first things first. So this is the practical fulfillment of habit number 1, which is being proactive, and habit number 2, which is beginning with the end in mind. So now we're actually putting the most important things first. It's centered around time management and prioritization. And he talks a lot about kind of the history of time management and how we have kind of evolved to being people that were like, first we had notes and checklists, then we, calendars and appointment books. And now we're kind of to the point where it's setting goals and targets that align with those values. But then I thought this was really interesting. He said, as a society, we're kind of evolving into what he called a 4th generation of time management, to where it's not time that needs to be managed, but it's really ourselves that need to be managed.
Yeah.
Which I was like, mind
oh yeah,
explosion
for
that.
sure. That is one of those things that really hit home. It's like you got to take control of yourself before you can take control of the rest of your stuff. And I really enjoyed this habit and this chapter where he breaks it down. We'll talk about it, the quadrants later on. But that, just once it starts to sink in, once it starts to resonate with your brain, it's just very powerful. You're like, oh man, you see, I spent way too much time in that quadrant at one point in my life, or like even today, I spend too much time in one of the other quadrants. So it really makes you self-aware.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I like it a lot.
Yeah. And we'll get into the quadrants, because that's really the whole meat of this whole chapter, and what kind of helps you to understand where some of us waste a lot of our time. But it's basically taking habit number 2, beginning with the end in mind. So knowing now what is my goal and taking that goal. And I would even say like time blocking, prioritizing, all that kind of stuff, so that we do not get wrapped up in the busyness of the day, which reminds me exactly of the one thing.
The one thing and the Pareto principle,
Yes.
all that stuff it falls into place in this habit.
And I mean, Gary Keller had to have read this book and been like, oh, I'm going to write a book that focuses specifically on this chapter, because so much of what they say in this chapter really resonates with what the one thing is written about. Okay, so let's get into I'm skipping some of the stuff, but let's get into the quadrants. So basically, there's 4 quadrants, and this is, there's a lot of examples in the book and a lot of tables, like visualizations that you can look at that show you like how much time we spend in each quadrant, et cetera. But quadrant number 1 is urgent and important. So these are activities.
I was going to say, we'll back up just a couple of seconds. So
he
starts off in the book by giving you a visualization of what the quadrants are. So you take a square, imagine a square, right? And then you basically just bust that up into 4 pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And quadrant 1 is the upper left-hand corner, upper left-hand box.
Yep.
Quadrant 2, upper right, lower left is 3, and lower right is 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then he breaks down the chart. If you're reading the book or you go online, you'll see how like they overlap.
Yes.
So I can't remember how he broke it down further, but like, actually I think we do have a diagram, don't we?
Towards the end I put one in there, but it's a little bit different. But anyway,
But anyway, so each quadrant has a couple different words associated to it, and he goes into depth how those can they overlap and kind of not necessarily overlap, but have, like quadrant 1 has urgency attached to it, where quadrant 4 also has urgency attached to it. So it's neat the way it's broken down.
Yeah. I think I'm a very visual person, so I think actually going to the book and looking at it helps a lot to understand it. So quadrant 1 is the urgent and important things. So things that need immediate attention, but they have to be crucial. They have to be things that truly need immediate attention. Emergencies, a last minute meeting that has to happen because things can't proceed without it, that type of stuff. But he says effective people deal with these tasks promptly, but also strive to minimize the number of activities in this quadrant. And one of the big themes in this is being able to say no, is really understanding what is something that's urgent and important.
Yeah, what you can and cannot say no to, and that presents itself in an urgent manner.
Yes.
Right, and he goes to talk to, I don't know if it's in the show notes, but most people are guilty of staying in quadrant 1.
Mm-hmm.
They call it, I think it may have been the breakdown at the end of the chapter, but this one is labeled as the procrastinators. So people who are procrastinators usually spend a majority of their time in quadrant 1 because you're always putting out fires, right? Mm-hmm. So you procrastinate, and then all of a sudden all you're doing is the most urgent thing in your life. Like, if I don't pay this bill, my electrics get shut off tomorrow.
Right.
Or if I don't do this, something's going to break now, you know? So that's where most people fall in quadrant 1 is basically the procrastinating. Like, a lot of procrastination will get you stuck in quadrant 1.
Yeah, or you yourself are producing these urgencies in quadrant 1 where it shouldn't be. Yes, are there always going to be, your child falls and breaks their arm and needs to go to the hospital. Yes, that is an emergency, something that you didn't cause, but most of us are causing these issues in number 1. And then number 2 is the not urgent but important. And this quadrant represents activities that contribute to long-term goals, personal growth, and building relationships. So this is where we should be spending the majority of our time. And I know for me personally, this is the hardest one because I am definitely wrapped up in that urgency, especially at the end of this chapter where Stephen Covey's son, I think it's Sean, talks about how in society nowadays we just have a need for urgency because it makes us feel fulfilled because, I've put out a fire and I finished this and I've done that. But actually
check something off my list kind of thing.
But actually spending the time to develop ourselves and personal growth, that's usually the last thing on our priority list.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
And I can't remember what they labeled this one as, but
it's the prioritizer.
The prioritizer, right? So what I saw when I was, this information was sinking in is we've talked about this in the past as well, where like back in the past, like before the Industrial Revolution and stuff, everyone was basically farmers and whatnot. They all had a skill, right? I associate this with kind of like living in the past where. Because or you could say like prepping or being, like all the other stuff. So you have all of your fires, mostly you prioritize or put out, right? And you're continually preparing for the future, right?
Yes.
So they use a couple different examples for quadrant 2. A lot of your activities like preventative maintenance, that kind of stuff, like preparing for the winter. If you're living in the past, chopping wood, right? What do you do during the summer? You spend your time in quadrant 2 preparing for future things, right? So I think that it's pretty neat. And I, on a personal level, I find myself thinking about this quite a lot because, the world is crazy right now and all the other stuff, but people who take the time to stockpile, I'm not getting crazy prepper here, but you should have a couple months worth of food on hand, right?
Sure.
So people who take the time to do that, they're spending more of their time in quadrant 2 here.
Mm-hmm. And
it saves you from all those fires and emergencies in the past. But by doing preventative maintenance on your house, hopefully your air conditioner or your heater do not break, because you're spending that time in quadrant 2 doing the right things, preparing for the future.
This also reminds me of the book we read, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and how he talks about all the different, I'm going to use the word quadrant again because it's in my head, but all the different buckets that we put our money into, saving, investing for the future, stocks, et cetera. And that is all that proactive work to ensure your future self.
Yeah. It directly relates to that. So Ramit in that book, the automation of your money, that's you being in quadrant 2 as far as managing your money, putting it all into savings or investing and all the other stuff. And then, if you have a quadrant 1 emergency, you can handle it because you spend enough time in 2.
And if you do enough 2, you're going to have a lot less of 1.
Right.
Some other things he talks about too that maybe we wouldn't ultimately think about, but is relationship building. Whether that's with your spouse or kiddos or whatever, but, and I think I can't remember the example he gave in the book, but just spending that time with your children and helping to develop them rather than being reactive to their behavior. He
also goes into, talks quite a lot about this as, the most successful people spend a lot of time, massaging their personal relationships and stuff like that. So you'll see that successful people naturally spend time here because they are minding the most important things that have future outcomes.
Yep. By listening to this podcast, you're also in quadrant 2. You're learning and expanding your mind.
True. Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Number 3. Okay. This is urgent, but not important. Activities in this quadrant are often distractions, interruptions, or unnecessary meetings. Those that are highly effective reduce the time spent on these activities by delegating or eliminating them if possible. Yeah,
these are the activities that you would want to say no to on a majority of the time. But he also talks about the fact that a lot of these things that we are in our mind are urgent. They might be urgent, but there may not be that in our mind. They seem important, but they might not be important. So you got to be able to differentiate between, yes, it's urgent, but is it completely necessary? Like, if I don't do this, is something going to fail or break, or am I going to, by doing this, am I losing time on other more important tasks, right? So I think the tricky part is identifying whether it's actually, does it fit in quadrant 1, or is it just a time waster for the most part?
This kind of reminds me of the saying, lack of poor planning on your part doesn't constitute an emergency on my part.
Yeah, exactly. I think he actually used an example that I'm trying to recall what he wrote, but
because they called this quadrant the yes man. So it's basically because you're allowing other people to interrupt your time, and you are therefore saying yes to their needs. It's a lot of times it's other people that are creating a sense of urgency that truly doesn't have a sense of urgency. Irrelevant meetings. Ooh, so glad I'm not part of that anymore.
Me too.
Needless interruptions, he said.
I just want to say that I value our meetings that we do have.
Thank you.
The ones that we do have, I find a lot of value in it, and I don't feel like my time is wasted.
Great. Wonderful. But this is even, if you're constantly caught in your email and feeling like you have to respond to every email, that kind of thing that isn't an urgency, you just have it in your mind that you have to respond right away.
Yeah, I like the analogy that this is the yes man quadrant. So you're constantly trying to appease other people, and you're afraid to say no. Yep. Like I started off with saying, that this is the part where these are the ones you say no to if you can. If you can.
And then quadrant 4, this is where we really want to spend the least amount of our time. These are not urgent and not important. This consists of time-wasting activities like excessive TV watching, mindless browsing, and other forms of procrastination. Effective people minimize their time spent in this quadrant, and it provides little value to their goals and priorities.
Yeah, I think probably with society in general, this is the problem. Well, one of the bigger problems we have is so many people spend so much, almost every waking moment that they spend in this quadrant, which is not good. And this goes being aware of this one, it kind of ties back to your personal mission statement, right? So if you have a personal mission statement and you're staying true to that, then you shouldn't be spending much time in here.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's harder and harder with, social media and all of the, our phone at our fingertips and all of that we have that's easy to just mindlessly scroll through. And one thing I do like, though, is he says, like, excessive TV watching, because he's not saying like you can't take a break and relax. Of course you need to do that, but you need to be aware of why you're doing it. Is it because you have had a really full day with a lot of work and you just need to kind of take an hour and relax? Or is it because you're procrastinating and you haven't done anything?
And not being afraid to offend anybody, and I hope I don't, but they call this quadrant the slacker. So if you were spending a majority of your time in this quadrant, then you could be a slacker.
Right. One characteristic he includes in this quadrant is gossip, which I love that he includes that, because
that's just wasted negative energy.
It is. And I don't want to offend anyone, but I'm sure other women are with me that sometimes when you get a group of women together, like, it can naturally happen, and it's something that I always try to avoid. And it's even happening in, like, my tennis group to some degree. And it's like, what wasted energy to just care about other people and their activities, like
outside of your circle of influence, right?
Exactly. Hey,
it's just
good tie-in.
Yeah, wasted time and energy on something that you can't control. If Billy Bob down the street is doing whatever.
Yep.
You got no control over that. Stop. All you're doing is wasting time.
Wasting energy.
Time and energy, emotions, all that good stuff.
Well, and I don't know about you, but the time, the few times that I do get wrapped up into some other person's life or like commenting on how they live their life, I feel pretty shitty about myself. Like once I sit down and, like, say I'll complain to Lindsay and then I'll offload, and I'm like, why did I even spend 15 minutes giving that a thought?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It goes back to being, aware of your circles, right?
Yep.
And so, you totally had control over how you reacted to that, but you let it get away from you. And at least you were cognizant enough to come back and be like,
recognize it.
Why did I do that?
Why did I care? Yeah. And and my mom wouldn't mind me saying this, even if she listens to this, but she has worked really hard on herself, but she is kind of a negative person like that, and always kind of gets wrapped up into how others are leading their life. And so it's what I saw my whole life. So it's a behavior that I'm aware that I can naturally sometimes slip into. But again, what this book is teaching us is you have to be aware of that mirror in front of you and change your behaviors. He talks about being a self-manager of your quadrant 2. And I really like this because these are just some action steps that you can take. And the first thing is to sit down and identify the key roles in your life. So whatever your role is in your job, how you make money, you're, a mother, a sister, whatever important roles you play in life, making a list of all of those.
Yeah. Well, what I liked is he broke it down in so we've talked about this during the one thing where you might have multiple one things. That's one of the things that really stuck out to me about our conversations about that is, what is your one thing for your family? What is your one thing for your spouse? What is your one thing for your business? What is your one thing for your church, your community involvement, all that stuff? That's what stuck out to me on this one. Yes. So I really like that too.
Yeah. And then selecting 1 to 2 goals for each of these key roles. So 1 to 2 results that you'd like to see in the next 7 days for each of these roles, and then literally scheduling them and keeping track of what you're doing every day to reach those goals, and then holding yourself accountable at the end of 7 days. Did you reach those? And then as you do that more and more, then that's how you're starting to look at with the end in mind of like, this is the person I want to be. These are the things I want to do for these, key roles that I have. And then you structure your day like that. I love it. He actually has I think it's in this section, an actual planner example. Yes. And I printed that out because I thought it was such a genius way to design your day. So look that back up in the book.
Yeah. And I like the way, I don't know if it's in here or not, but he talks about how we should plan our week as it basically the world evolves around a week increment. So taking 30 minutes of your Sunday or Saturday, whatever day works for you. He used like a Sunday evening, and we've talked about this before too, but just taking 30 minutes of your day or your Sunday or whatever day works for you and planning out your week.
Yes. And he talks about part of the being able to focus on these important things is to understand delegation. and I wrote golfer, but I meant gopher. Either gopher versus stewardship delegation. So gopher is
Gopher as in go for something like
Gopher,
yeah. I read it the first couple times when I was reading the book. I was like, what? Go for
yeah,
what?
but like go for this, go for
Yeah,
that
go for
type of
this,
thing.
go for that kind of person. Yeah.
And that's basically micromanaging. So
Yes.
if you're delegating and you can't just give a high kind of overview of what you need done, you need to micromanage and say every step that they should do. That's go for delegating. But stewardship is actually just giving a clear understanding of what the results should be, identifying the parameters loosely in which you want them to work, identifying any resources they need, setting up standards of performance, and then specifying consequences if they don't get it done.
Yeah, so when you delegate the task, instead of micromanaging what you said, giving every single task, by giving them stewardship, you're giving them ownership of that task. And he talks about it. I don't know if we got it in the notes here, but giving them the leeway to accomplish the tasks in the manner that they come up with, right? Because we say this in carpentry. There's 18 different ways to build a chair, right? But at the end of the day, as long as the end result is a chair, right? And so you should, if you're going to delegate stewardship to someone for a task or a mission, whatever, you should give them the leeway to accomplish that the way that they deem fit, right? Otherwise, you are coming back to the gopher side of it, micromanaging.
And a big part of it too is checking in at the end and making sure that they met the standards, and if there are consequences, then going through with those consequences. And I won't tell the whole story, but he gives a great example of how he basically got his son to do a great job of keeping the
yard
lawn up. Yeah, because Stephen Covey didn't have time. And so he gives a great story of how, he thought he explained it well, his son didn't do it, blah, blah, but he realized in the end it was because his son didn't realize or didn't believe that he was actually taking kind of full investment into his son doing this, and that there were going to be consequences.
Yeah, that was a great story.
Okay, and then why is habit 3 so hard? So this is something that Sean Covey at the end of the chapter talks about. He talks about the urgency addiction, and I talked about that a little bit in the beginning because I definitely have this. It's that sense of like, oh, I've done something, I've put out a fire, and now on to the next thing, and now the next thing, and now I've got all these things checked off on my to-do list.
This one kind of irks me because I've worked with a lot of people in the military that were like this.
Yeah.
The whole business is a badge of honor,
yes.
right? So just to keep up the appearance of like, oh, I'm working 5 hours late and I've sent like 4 million emails more than you have and all this other stuff. Literally, I mean, it's literally just people trying to, earn stars, right? It's just, it's unhealthy for the most part. And it's just, in a society where we can't be bored, where we have to check things off the list or have to, constantly feel like we've accomplished something. Yeah, this one bothers me personally because I was never the guy. Like, if 5 o'clock rolled around, there were no fires. My family is more important than trying to look important to some kind of organizational figurehead, right?
Yes.
So I'm like, I'm going home.
Yes.
I don't need to do all this.
Yeah. I used to think, at least in the military, that it was because those people didn't want to go home. They probably didn't have a family.
Oh, I'm sure there's probably a
handful.
handful of those too. Probably in any place in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Lindsay and I went through this, I would say maybe last year, because that's when we were doing several renovations. It was, you and I were still doing real estate, et cetera. So we were busy all the time. So when people would ask him like, oh, how are things going? His initial reaction would be like, oh, I'm so busy. Like, I work 18-hour days, blah, blah, blah. And so I kind of talked to him on the side. I'm like, do you find that to be a badge of honor? Because in my mind, we should want to earn the income that we're earning with a lot less hours. And so I think having that discussion for the both of us really kind of changed our mind of like, it's not how many hours you work and how busy you are. It's the end state.
Right.
So, yeah. And it's funny how society has changed because, hundreds of years ago, leisure was
this is a new invention.
Yeah. Was something that you were high class if you could just lay around all day and eat grapes.
Yeah, exactly. You were rich or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole illusion that matter of fact, I just saw a video on this the other day. People in today's society, they think it's a God-given right to get to the point where they can do nothing. Right? It's just not the way we're wired as humans. It's like we need to continually produce something, or we're basically like society will not continue to work if we don't have people who are willing to produce, right?
Right.
You can't just create a society where you literally can do whatever you want, whenever you want, and not produce anything and continue to exist.
Right.
So it's like,
but it's finding that balance of, and again, we've talked about how there's no such thing as balance, but finding ways to do things more efficiently, delegating, finding your who's, et cetera, so that you're still getting the same production results with less time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've found it as I've gotten into tennis, and I apologize for all the tennis talk. It's just something that I am really into right now.
Forefront of your mind.
Yeah, but I love being able to say, like, when somebody asks me, like, oh, how'd you spend your day? And I was like, oh, I spent 2 hours playing tennis today. Like, to me, that's great because that's 2 hours I was able to take out of my day to enjoy something that I like, you know, and not have to work those 2 hours. So I think that's the ultimate goal, at least it is for me.
Oh, no. I mean, I mean, at the end of the day, I think ultimately we'd all want to be to a point where we have enough financial freedom. Again, the purpose of this podcast, financial freedom, right? When we get to the point where we've built enough wealth, we've, put all of our bricks in place, and we do have the ability to design our own day. Right. I think anybody would want that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I guess I'm just trying to make the point of, even as you're building to that, it doesn't mean you have to work 20 hours a day.
Right.
Like, yes, hustle, absolutely hustle, but understand how you're spending your hours. Don't be busy just to be busy. Be effective.
Right.
And that can still hopefully give you some free time, even as you're building.
Remember the 80-20 rule.
Exactly.
But make sure you do the 20.
Yeah.
Right. It's like you can't neglect the 20 and expect the same results.
Yes, exactly. So. Cool. Well, I think this was a great episode. I love these 2 habits.
Yeah, we have this one little chart here that came from the book too. I really like that too, where they break down the quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4, and what you basically your return on investment for your time, right? So in quadrant 1, you basically get an equal return on your time and energy that you spent. So like, do whatever the task is, get an equal return. Mm-hmm. Whereas the opposite, say 4, you spend a lot of time and energy, say surfing the internet or watching TV, but what do you get for that? Nothing. You get nothing in return, right? And then quadrant 3, you spend a lot of time and energy putting out fires or doing the yes man stuff, other stuff, and you get almost no return on investment. Mm-hmm. So, and where you want to be is 2. So you spend time and energy, basically, what is the I'm trying to think of the farmer's analogy where it's like, you reap what you sow, right? Yeah. So you spend a lot of time planting the seeds, and then, you get a huge return on your time and energy. Mm-hmm. So I like that graph that they had there. Yeah, because it's the same stack of money for each time and energy, and then the return shows you different. And so in quadrant 2, it's showing like 3 stacks of money, like it's 3 times your return in that small amount of time and energy. I love that. Yeah, it's really good. I really enjoyed this section of the book for sure. Yeah. So next week we will talk about 5 and 6. Oh, no, wait. 1, 2, 3. We did 3. Sorry, 4 and 5. Yep. And then the last one we will talk about habits 6 and 7 and kind of just sum up the whole and wrap it up with the last episode. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to take us out? Sure. Yeah. So as always, we really appreciate everybody out there who support us, and everybody's listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please share that if you think someone could get any value out of that. And for all the people that watch us on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and share. Leave us a comment. We love getting feedback, as always. We're always looking for it. So, matter of fact, we've had some recent feedback for books, recommendations, and stuff like that. So please keep the comments coming, and we look forward to seeing you next episode. Yeah. See you guys next time. All right.